Yo, what's good, world? What's good? It's your boy Preezy back at it again. Today, I want to share with you my list of 9 gangsters that infiltrated the rap industry and made an impact. Number 9 on this list is Jimmy Henchman, hella from Brooklyn. Came up in Brooklyn, New York City during the 80s, a rough time, ran with a lot of heavy hitters like the original 50 Cent, who he met at Rikers Island, C-74 Juvenile Unit. During the 90s, he was running with Haitian Jack. Ken Tut was a part of that whole circle, basically. And he actually met Tupac through Haitian Jack while Tupac was prepping for the Above the Rim role. They had Tupac shadowed various gangsters out of East New York and Brooklyn, and basically Haitian Jack and Jimmy Henchman was a part of that clique and other various players. And even though he skated on the Tupac rap for years, basically, like Biggie took the brunt of that publicly, but behind closed doors, as it is pretty much known publicly, it was other forces at hand. Biggie didn't really have anything to do with it. It was more Jimmy Henchman in that whole circle, but he kind of skated on that as far as the industry, and he was able to move and shake. He had a very successful management firm. He managed the game with Sean Kingston at very high points in their career. But eventually the Tupac thing came back to bite him. Also, he was allegedly committing murders for hire. He had hitters on the streets, basically. He had a cocaine distribution network still running the whole time, allegedly, while he was in the music business. So Jimmy Henchman is definitely one of the most notorious dudes to make an impact in the streets as well as the rap industry. Number 8 on this list is Chili Patton. Shouts out to him from Chicago. He was a mentor and was back in Lupe Fiasco during his early years. Actually, when he was prior to him blowing up with Atlantic, when he was about to sign a deal with Jay-Z, Chili Patton was basically behind that whole play that was going to take place. But before Lupe got on, Chili Patton was involved. There was a raid on his home in 2003, and they found a key that was to a storage unit, and they found 6 kilograms of uncut pure heroin in that storage unit, and he went on trial. And in 2007, the feds actually had a taped conversation between him and Lupe Fiasco, talking about cutting up whole reds and whole yellow ones. And if you didn't know, in Chi-Town, whole reds and whole yellow ones, that's slang for heroin. But Lupe was like, yo, we was talking about music, we was discussing music. This had nothing to do with heroin, basically. So Lupe skated, he didn't have no involvement. They didn't bring no charges against him, but Chili Patton ended up getting 44 years for that. But he's definitely a legend in the Chi-Town streets. Still, even through a short time in the music industry, he's very respected. Made a lot of affiliations, a lot of alliances within that, and he's thought of highly. So definitely shout out to Chili Patton, number 8 on this list. I never felt more alive than riding shotgun in Klein's Green 5 until the cops pulled guns. Now, y'all may remember that particular lyric from Jay-Z's The Black Album. It's a song from Allure, on the album called Allure, where Jay-Z name drops Calvin Klein, who kind of took Jay-Z under his wing during a particular time in Brooklyn, during the late 80s when the crack epidemic was booming, and Calvin Klein was one of the heavy hitters, originally for Red Hook, but he had spots in Marcy, which is Jay-Z, when the Jay-Z connection comes in. He had spots in Marcy as well as other spots over Brooklyn, over NYC, what have you. But he did a long, lengthy prison term, but when he came out, he got down with Convict Music, Akon and them, and he's an executive, whatever, moving and shaking. But he's one of the dudes that was major in the streets, that was able to flip his street lore, flip his credibility in that lane into the music lane as well, and really make an impact. And he's well respected throughout the music industry as well as the streets. So definitely shout out to Calvin Klein, one of Brooklyn's finest. Number 5 on this list is a name that rings significant bells in hip-hop history, and that's Haitian Jack. A lot of y'all may know him from being embroiled in the Tupac quad shooting fiasco, when on Against All Odds, he name-checked Haitian Jack for like a whole verse, basically, and disrespected him. And to the average rap fan, they may have not known who Haitian Jack was at the time, but over years this came out that he was one of the most notorious and ruthless goons out of Brooklyn, New York, East New York, Brooklyn to be specific. during the 80s and the 90s. And he got down with Tupac. He was moving and shaking in the industry. He even infamously dated Madonna at a time. But he basically was a part of setting up the quad studio shooting with Tupac, basically. And because he was also involved with the rape case that Tupac went to jail with. Allegedly, Haitian Jack was one of the guys that actually did the rape, not Tupac. Like, Tupac did what he did, it was consensual, but afterwards, Haitian Jack and a couple other guys ran the train on the young lady in question, allegedly. So that's how that led up to the quiet shooting, because basically Tupac was like, F y'all, because y'all basically did the dirt and left me to handle all it, because he was the only one charged, basically, Tupac, in the whole rape thing, because then, like they said, it was a setup for money, but what have you, so forth. But basically, Haitian Jack skated on that, continued his reign of terror, went out to the West Coast, Beverly Hills. He allegedly shot one of the BMF members, killed them in the club, and then he was deported back to Haiti, like he's Haitian, hence the name Haitian Jack. But there's been rumors he's back in the States, he's not, or this, that, and so forth, but he's definitely a dude that was a gangster, that had a real reputation, that made an impact in the music industry. I don't know his whole credentials, but it said that he did some behind the work scenes, management or whatever, but he was definitely entrenched in that whole scene and moving with the biggest stars of the time. So, shouts to Haitian Jack. Now, number 4 on this list is Michael Harry Harris, who fronted Suge Knight and David Kenner $1.5 million for 50% of the state to start a company that was supposed to be called Godfather Entertainment, I believe, but it ended up being Death Row Records. So, Harry was a bounty hunter blood in LA. He was a notorious drug kingpin, was one of the biggest dudes in the city during that time. But like a lot of dudes in that life, he was trying to get out of the life, so he was looking to invest his money in legitimate businesses and endeavors, and one of them endeavors came in the form of music, rap music. He also funded a lot of other people, as far as music and under the table different businesses. But Death Row, Suge Knight and them, somehow they came onto his radar. I won't go through the whole specifics of that, but they came onto his radar while he was incarcerated. He was already incarcerated on drug charges, basically, and they was like, look, just front this money and we'll give you the 50% stake, so he did that, and that money helped fund what became Death Row Records. But when it came time for Harry to get his stake in the company, basically Suge Knight and David Kenner was like, nah, that never happened, like, we're the owners of Death Row, we started it. There's no knowledge of that. So there was a legal battle for years, and then after years, the judge actually rewarded Michael Harris's wife, Lydia Harris, like a $107 million judgment, from a lawsuit. But she never really got none of that money because Suge Knight's money was messed up by then. He was involved in various foreclosures, bankruptcies, and catalog of Death Row was sold and all of that. So it ended up never coming to pass with her getting the money. So it's a crazy story, but shouts out to Harry He's definitely a dude from the streets that made an impact in the music industry and that did his thing. So shouts to him. Also, let the record state that Harry was released from prison on October 11, 2011 after serving 23 and a half years of his original sentence. So welcome home to Harry a stand-up dude from all respects as far as I know. 4, Ocean's 11, 12, 13, all of those movies in the franchise. That was Chaz Williams, a notorious dude from Queens. His claim to fame was robbing banks, and he did that for years on end, never got caught. He was notorious for that. But then one particular big robbery, a security guard got shot in the head, and he got caught basically, and it all led up to him being sentenced to 95 years, which is basically a death sentence. But during this time in jail, he was in a law library. He was also obtaining degrees in business and other things, and he eventually knocked his sentence down to 15 years on the pills, and he got out. So he gets back on the streets, and he befriends a young 50 Cent prior to 50 Cent becoming 50 Cent. But they eventually fell out. You may remember 50 Cent mentioning him on Many Men and another a couple other songs. Basically, he referred to the fallout. But Chaz started Black King Entertainment, which was a big management firm. It also had rappers signed, like he had the rapper Grab. He was real big in the early thousands, still doing this thing on the indie circuit, you know, on the underground. But he had Grab, and he was real known, real respected throughout the music industry. He also managed a bunch of notable names and was well respected. So shouts out to Chaz. And next on the list is AZ Faison, who a lot of you may know as Ace from the movie Paid in Full, which is basically a depiction of AZ Faison's life. AZ Faison was one of the biggest hustlers in Harlem from the mid 80s to the late 80s. Shouts to 7th Ave and 132nd, you know, and all of that. But he was basically one of the biggest dudes in Harlem. But you all know the story. He was the victim of a robbery in the Bronx. He got shot, and that kind of gave him second thoughts about the streets, and he started to invest his money into other things, you know, particularly rap, you know, trying to get into the music business. And he formed a group called Mob Style. You know, he had Gangster Lil with him, he had Whip Wop, he also had Pretty Tone Capone, who was down with them, and they released a couple of records that rang bells. And they even famously chased out NWA out of the Apollo at the 1991 show, you know. So they just didn't like the fake Gangsters. That was a little beef that went under the radar. That's one of the more underreported beefs in hip-hop history, rather. But AZ Faison was basically a dude that came from the streets of Harlem, did his thing, you know, made his legend there, and also made an impact in hip-hop, you know. For rap aficionados who's in the gangster rap, Mob Style was really a pioneering group of some individuals that really lived it and spit it on records. So shouts out to AZ Faison. Next on this list is Kevin Childs. He was one of the biggest dudes in Harlem as far as the drug trade throughout the 80s and the early 90s. But he eventually parlayed his drug earnings and other earnings into legitimate businesses, dry cleaners, clothing stores. He even had a rap label called Big Boss Records, which was big on the indie scene during the early 90s, on the underground scene. And he was on the verge of actually talking to sign a distribution deal, you know, because he was in cahoots or rubbing shoulders with the Puffies of the world. Anybody that was uptown, Harlem, Bronx, whatever, that was in the entertainment world, they was privy to who Kevin Childs was. So he was getting advice and rubbing shoulders with those dudes, and he was on the verge of actually locking down a distribution deal. But that's when the feds swooped in and tried to indict him on kingpin charges, and he fought it, and I think he got 2 hung juries, I believe, before eventually striking a deal where he ended up getting 10 years in prison. But he's also the founder of Don Diva magazine. Him and his wife, Tiffany Childs, they founded Don Diva magazine, which also highlights a lot of dudes on this list and their trials and tribulations as far as other dudes, you know, that stood up and were honorable men as far as following the code of the streets and the code of the underworld. So shouts out to Kevin Childs. He influenced a lot of people. Like, if you look, like, as I mentioned before, like the Puffies in the world, like Puffy gave him advice, but also the Puffies of the world, dudes from Uptown Entertainment, took game from him, guys like him, because his style was impeccable when he was in the streets. He was known as one of the more fly, suave cats in the game. So definitely shouts out to Kevin Childs. So that's my list of 9 gangsters that infiltrated the rap industry. If you dug the content, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and be sure to share with a friend. Much love. Peace.